Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging podcast discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, 𝗘𝗀𝗁𝗘, provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategies, new construction advice, home improvement tips, and much, much more. And now, to guide you around the world of real estate, here's your host and Real Estate Radio Live team leader, 𝗘𝗀𝗁𝗘.
Welcome in. This is 𝗘𝗀𝗁𝗘 with Real Estate Radio Live, the podcast series, and Happy New Year's to all as we kick off 2017. Going to be a great, exciting year as we always do on Tuesdays. It's Mike and Joe. Good to have you back, Mike.
Hey there. Happy New Year.
We are back with you, more committed than ever. 2017 is going to be exciting on many different levels. We're going to continue to bring you what we think is quality education information on real estate. We have all the experts. As you know, Mike's here on the real estate side. We'll help you on the financing. But during the course of the year, we're going to continue to bring different people in for really anything and everything real estate like we've done before.
That's what we do.
That's what we do. That is what we do.
So we plan on doing on Tuesdays as well. So we're going to be doing that on
That's right.
On the Mike D show.
That's right, absolutely.
So it's going to be fun.
So just as a review, so we have Mike doing a solo show on Mondays, and then Mike and
Mondays.
I, right?
Did I say Mondays? Or Tuesdays? Yeah, Mondays.
Right.
I'm all mixed
up. It's early, and it's the first of the year,
That's
so
right.
we have some excuses here. So just a quick review. We have Mike is solo on Mondays doing his show, and then Mike and I team up on Tuesdays. I do a show then solo Wednesdays, Thursdays, and then I team up with Bobby and Buddy on Fridays. That will continue to be that same format. Just a reminder, again, if you need anything, any information or consultation on real estate, Mike is here for you. You could reach him 408-630-0101, and also the website 𝗥𝗲𝗀𝗃, right?
That's right, 𝗥𝗲𝗀𝗃.com.
Anything on real estate. Remember, our primary focus when you're listening to these podcasts is that we want you to contact us, email us, give us a call, go to the website, and if you have any questions, we're here to help. For me, if you need any financing, I'm here for you on the purchase or refinance side, 408-838-9060, or you can go to the website, 𝗓𝗡radiolive.com. Today we're going to do a kind of a follow-up review of the granny units Mike and I did. I guess it was about 2 weeks ago, maybe.
Right, a couple of weeks ago.
Right before Christmas.
Right before all the madness.
Yeah, that's right. And the reason we want to do a follow-up on this is because it's really important to the city of San Jose. I think I read somewhere, they could have thousands of additional units, which could make a huge difference, Mike, for not only to help some of the housing that we need.
Yeah.
But then let's face it too, it's a revenue source for the city too, right?
It's a revenue source, yeah. It's those two things as well as affordable housing,
right? Which
is a huge
point.
It's a huge need we have too. So all three of those reasons are, it's going to be good for the city, I think.
Yeah. So why don't you give us a quick review for those that may not have tuned into the first podcast, kind of what the city has proposed and excited about here as we kick off 2017. It, I guess, takes effect this month.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the note of the whole website, you mentioned our websites, and I'm actually building out a whole section on my website devoted to granny units. So I'm trying to build out all of the pieces of information those of you that live in San Jose need to know about the granny unit, the whole thing with the granny units that's happening in the city. And, for people that are listening that live outside of the city, too, this is definitely something you should look into.
I agree.
If you have the room on your property and the standards of your current city will allow for it, I think it's definitely, we're going to talk later with Joe about how to finance building some of these. If you don't have the cash laying around under your mattress to build something like this, how do you finance it? How do you get the money to build it? And Joe's going to talk about that later. The
other thing I was thinking about, Mike, and we'll talk more about this too after you kind of get through the summary, is that this really, people always talk about, where should I invest? How should I invest? This could be considered really an investment opportunity, right?
Most definitely.
Even on your own property.
Yeah, I think if you can't afford to buy a whole other property or another house or duplex or multifamily, this is the most effective, cost-effective way to do it.
Yeah.
Especially if your city allows for it, or if your city makes it, I guess to rephrase that, if your city makes it easy for you to do it, which hasn't really been the case with San Jose for some time now. So on that note, basically what they're looking at doing, before it was really lot size was the big thing. So before for an attached unit, you needed a 6,000 square foot lot. For detached, you needed an 8,000 square foot lot. That's a pretty sizable lot.
It is.
In an area like San Jose. I know there's probably people out there listening, because we have people all over the country listening, that, the norm is acre lots. Well, in San Jose, with the lack of land and, an 8,000 square foot lot's a pretty dang big lot. So they've reduced the 6,000 and 8,000 square foot requirements for only 5,445 for both attached and detached units. So they've really lowered that limit. They can, what else do we have here? Size of granny units increases from a maximum of 700 square feet to 800 square feet. Okay. So 100 square feet's that's a pretty big jump.
That's a nice size unit,
yeah,
100 square feet.
It is. I mean, that's good size. Yeah. Homeowners can now build studio apartments as secondary units. So you had even mentioned off air as even building a loft or something similar to that attached would be considered a granny unit. So oftentimes when people think of accessory, so there's all different types of terms for it: accessory dwelling unit, secondary unit, granny unit. Oftentimes when people think of that, they think of this just detached little house in the backyard.
Right.
Well, it doesn't have to be that way. Most of them are, but you can have that. You can have something attached to the back of a detached garage. You can have somewhat of a loft or apartment attached to the home. There's all sorts of ways you can do it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an independent detached unit on your lot. It could be attached to the back of your home.
Absolutely.
As you had mentioned, we talked a little bit too, you could have a garage or it attached to the back of the garage.
Yeah, or even on top of your current garage if your house...
Can you do it on top?
Yeah, so oftentimes they say you can't do a granny unit in the front, but I've seen in different cities where if the way that the house is built in the garage and it kind of blends in, I've seen them done on top of the garages. Now, I'd have to check with the city, and I'm sure you'd have to get it, City of San Jose, I'm sure you'd obviously have to get it approved.
Right.
But I would guess if the house and the way the house is built and the architecture is, if it made sense, then you might be able to get it done.
Very good.
So, other changes are that they're allowing for uncovered parking, or they're really easing the parking restrictions for granny units, whereas before they were very strict. They wanted, an additional parking space covered. They wanted additional parking on top for the primary residence. They wanted setback and paving. There's paving requirements, all sorts of things. So they're really easing the restrictions on the parking. And then, as normal, materials used to construct the secondary unit can be similar to those used on the main house, and that's pretty standard for, I would say, most. I mean, I think most cities are going to want it to, they're not going to want this totally random dwelling unit on the property that looks different from the actual house. So it's got to kind of go in line with that. So those are some of the major changes.
Yeah, those are good. And again, Mike had mentioned if you're listening and you're not in the city of San Jose limits, it doesn't matter. I would also, since we're on this topic, if you have any questions about it, always check in with Mike or I, or double check to see, because it doesn't matter if you're in Santa Clara, San Mateo, Alameda counties. This may be also an opportunity for you to add something, and you may not know if these requirements exist, or you could go to the city or a particular place where you live, to find out if something like this is really a benefit to you. I would say that for the most part, if you're going to own the home long term, or even, Mike, in some cases, depending on a person's long term goal, let's say you had a lot of 700,000 square feet, and let's say you had a decent sized single family on there, and then you added another 700 or 800 square feet maybe on, and then later on down the road, property became a rental for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That could be some sizable income.
Absolutely, and we can talk after the break when we get more on the mortgage side is how that's going to help pay down your 30-year, that long marriage with the bank of 30 years, and how that's going to help you pay that down. I think to kind of go on that topic of, I work with a good amount of investors, but with not only investors, but with first-time home buyers or, just someone looking to buy up or buy something. If there is something out there with this accessory dwelling unit, something that can help subsidize their mortgage and their payment, their taxes, I always recommend that. I know sometimes people don't want someone else living on their property, and I get that, and that's just but then you have to weigh out the good and the bad, right? And especially like first-time home buyers, if you have the ability to buy a property, it doesn't have to be a duplex, but it'd be great to be a duplex. But if it's a single-family home with another unit on it that can subsidize your mortgage, I mean, man, you're setting yourself up for a really good future, in my opinion. And furthermore, the good thing about it is that even for people that have lived in their home for a long time and build a granny unit, you might have aging parents. You can move into that.
Right.
You're going to probably have millennials with college debt coming out of college that are going to. How's that working out for you, Joe?
I have both.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's going to have benefits on all fronts.
Yeah, really.
Really to me the biggest downside is obviously if you have to build it, the cost. I mean, but that's just a fact of life. The other downside would be if you do rent it to someone you don't know and that turns out to not be a good situation, that's the other downside. But other than that, I mean, I think it's a really good investment.
Yeah, so. I agree. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We're continuing to talk about kind of a follow-up that Mike and I did a couple weeks ago on granny units and the benefits of them. We're going to get into more detail and not only the parameters in which you could build and use, and we're going to get more specifically on how do you finance them, what's the best use of money, how do you finance these things, do you pay cash, do you refinance, do you take it out of your investments? We're going to get into more detail. We'll be back with you to continue in just a couple of minutes.
For more information on today's program, visit 𝗓radiolive.com. That's 𝗓radiolive.com.
Hi, this is 𝗘𝗀𝗁 of Real Estate Radio Live. Thanks for tuning into our podcast. We are your go-to resource for all aspects of real estate, including buying, selling, refinancing, building, and legal and tax advice, and much more. You can subscribe to Real Estate Radio Live podcast on iTunes and Stitcher to listen to an engaging discussion about anything and everything real estate. So make sure you get our app, RE Radio Live, in the iTunes store to follow the show.
Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's topic or guests, just visit 𝗓radiolive.com. That's 𝗓radiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, 𝗘𝗀𝗁.
Welcome back in. This is 𝗘𝗀𝗁 sitting alongside Mike 𝗍𝗪𝗪𝗍. Today we're talking about granny units, a follow-up show, or podcast that Mike and I did a couple weeks ago. We wanted to continue to bring this to you, the consumers, because it's so important and it's really a valuable proposition that the city put out there to the city of San Jose. But we want to extend that. We know that we get listeners all over the place, not only the Bay Area, but in general, the United States and all over. So really, you should be asking yourself, regardless of if you're in the city limits of San Jose, if something like this makes sense to you, because it could add value to your property. You could make some strategies, put some strategies together, and that's what Mike and I are going to talk to now as the second part of the show is how do you finance something like this, and what if you did do something like this, and how are you going to use that additional income? Are you going to pay down your loan, or are you going to use it for other investments? There's all kinds of different positive things that could come from this.
Yeah, I mean, it could not only just could add value to your property, but could add value to your life.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's true.
By paying down your mortgage, by gaining more income, discretionary income, or if using that income towards, like you mentioned,
right,
your 401, whatever, your investment accounts, stock accounts. I mean, you can use that money for a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, so let's get into a little bit, Mike, about some different hypotheticals here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the possibilities. If we'll just do some examples. For example, if you built one of these units, again, we talked about this before, Mike. It's speculative, but let's say someone built. Let's take it to the max, a 700 to 800 square foot unit. I know we talked about it last time, but our thought was that might cost anywhere from 80 to 100,000, maybe. Just depending.
I would think you're paying $100 a square foot.
Okay.
Probably for even numbers. I think that's probably not that far off.
Okay.
So you call it $100 a square foot, so 700, 800, 70, 80 grand.
Okay.
For that.
So a $70,000 to $80,000 investment, and again, you're adding 700 to 800 square feet to your property. Now, one of the things to be careful of, we talked about this too, Mike, is let's say, let's just use Willow Glen. I think it's, I don't know, is it 650 to 700 square foot these days?
Yeah.
Now,
price.
You can't automatically assign that value to those units, can you?
No.
It really doesn't work that way.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think you're probably looking more at half of that.
Okay.
Roughly. But it is you're gonna get your money out of it, basically. Right. So I guess what we're saying is, you have a 3,000 square foot house in Willow Glen. It's going to sell for $650 to $700 a square foot.
Okay.
Then let's say you have an 800 square foot granny unit. You built probably for $100 a square foot, unless it's this opulent granny unit or something. But so then let's say you spent 80 to 100 grand on that. But you're definitely going to get the money out of that granny unit when you sell it, because it's probably going to sell for $300 to $400 a square foot, roughly. I'm all rough numbers, but so let's talk about the financing that, because I think the easiest scenario probably is taking money out of, if you have equity, right? Yeah,
no, I think so. We talked about it last time, but let's kind of review the different options. Of course, option one is, you have cash. If you're fortunate enough to have that laying around, you have 80 to 100 grand, and you think it's a good move. Some people are are really concerned about extra debt, or maybe they have a really good interest rate on their first loan, or they're concerned about acquiring more debt. I would say that unless you're really, this is something, Mike, you want to check with your financial planner, CPA. Always, these are the two people that I would advise you to work with when you're making these kind of decisions. One, because it is affecting your finances, your daily, your monthly finances. Two, it's affecting potentially your tax rate and what you pay for taxes. It could potentially be doing that. Yeah. And that's property taxes. Yeah, be careful of that.
It will. They're going to reevaluate your property, but okay. I mean,
that's all right. That's okay. Again, another win-win.
Yeah.
So you could pay cash.
Think about this, not to interject, but so let's say you spent $100 grand on one of these units. And you're getting $1,500 rent. It's going to take about 5 years to pay off, get back the money you put into that. Right. Which is not a long time.
No, it's not.
And even if the rent's more, it's going to take less time to pay off. Or if it costs less, and still you're getting $1,500 in rent. So you get the point. So that's not a lot of time to put in the time to build it and to get the money back in 4 or 5 years. I'd say that's a pretty damn good investment.
Right. It really is. No, that's a really good point, and how quickly you could pay that off. The other thing I'm sure some people are going to be looking to do is do a home equity line, which, and again, that is okay too, as long as you have a strategy, I think, to either pay that off or pay it down in a short period of time. Yeah. The prime's going up. The Fed's already raised once. The likelihood of her raising 2 to 3 times next year minimum is probably likely. So be careful of a home equity line. I think that's another good strategy if you want to pay it off down the road. And Mike said, that might be not a bad idea, Mike. Let's say you do a home equity line. You don't want to mess with your first, right? And you just take that payment every single month. Pay it down, right? Like the strategy you just used. In 5 years, if you take that approach. And the good thing with the home equity line is you're still going to get your tax benefit. That's really, as I do the last scenario would be refinance, take $100,000 out, roll all the cash, roll out that payment into one. Right. I am a big fan of that scenario if it makes sense for a person, only because, again, you're going to have one loan fixed to one rate. Right. Going forward, you're going to have the tax benefit. And you don't have to worry about the prime or the adjustable rate on the home equity line. But you got to have the equity. Well, you have to have that. You have to have the equity for the HELOC too. Right. You have to have the equity for the HELOC. Yeah. But I think it's these are really, really good options. And the other thing is to keep in mind, the last thing I would do, and I know this is a possibility, is the reason I'm not a real big fan of just taking cash from somewhere or taking from your investments Now, again, someone may, money could be no object, right? And if that's the case, then that's different.
Yeah.
But most people, they really try to look at, strategically, what's the smartest way to use my money. Most of the time, to take it away from investments or cash is not smart, because then it's not working somewhere in a different area for you. That's why I'm not a big fan of doing something like this out of your investment, retirement, 401k, those types of things. I would say, if you can, at all possible, do an equity line. Second thing, maybe do a first and second, consolidate, take the cash out. The third would be, if you have the extra cash, pay cash. I would really caution someone to borrow this money against a 401k, or take it from your retirement, or take it from somewhere that's already making money for you.
So why don't you talk briefly about the whole idea of paying down a mortgage, or, so we've talked about it before, not only on the granny unit conversation, but just many other times. We always recommend to people, if you can afford it, make an extra payment a year. So talk about what that does for somebody. Yeah, just the kind of the old way and the simplest way to look at this. You've probably heard it a lot, but the bottom line is, if you were to take a 30-year mortgage out today and start your payments, and if you did nothing but make one additional payment per year, so instead of 12 payments of $2,000, you made 13 payments. You made an additional one of $2,000. If you do nothing but that, Mike, you pay your mortgage off in at least approximately 7 years earlier. So then you're looking at 23 years instead of 30, right? When you make that additional payment, do you apply it all towards principal? All towards principal. Okay, got it. So in this theory, and you kind of touched on it earlier, the reason I love this whole granny unit potential is that, seriously, this is a great strategy to pay down or pay your mortgage off aggressively. Yeah. And accelerate that process. Yep. So if you took, again, these are hypothetical examples, but let's say we use this example off air. If you had a $3,000 mortgage payment and you had a $1,500 rent from that granny unit, and you religiously took that $1,500 and every single month applied it toward that principal, depending on where the life was in that loan, Mike. Yeah. I mean, if you started it, today, that would be 15 years difference. I mean, if you literally paid half that and it applied towards principal, you could have that paid off in 15 years. And a lot of people have a hard time, kind of wrapping their head around that 15 years from now. But 15 years goes quick. It definitely does. And I think the other thing you have to be is disciplined as a investment property owner. You have to be disciplined when that rent income hits your account, to forward it on to the bank and not go to Vegas or something like that. I think that's really important in this whole piece. And not to sound like a financial advisor, I'm not perfect either, but I think that's the big piece of this is making sure that does go to the bank at some point. So real quick, we got a minute or so left here, Mike. What are the potential, because it's always good to look at all angles, what are the potential downsides to something like this? What would you say if someone said, Mike, this is like a no-brainer, without thinking, what are the potential downsides to someone building this? I think one of them is definitely getting some renter in there that just doesn't work out, parties or is just loud or just doesn't work out. Disrupts your family or whatever. I think that's probably most people's number one fear. Now maybe you don't get rid of that fear if you have family or friends in there. Maybe it could be just as worse, but that's maybe a way to step aside from that. But the other thing is, from a neighborhood perspective, is more traffic. Okay, that's another good lack of parking. I think is a downside, especially since they're easing the parking restrictions. But frankly, they have to in order to let people do this. So I think parking restrictions or just lack of parking might be another issue. And then the other thing is you could have some neighbors squabbling with each other about how it looks. Is it looking into my yard? That's true. Going back and forth with planning and that type of thing. So off the top of my head, I mean, those are really the top three things I see being an issue. I'm sure there's maybe a couple more, but I believe the benefits far outweigh the negatives. I would agree. All right, that's about all the time we have today. Just a reminder, as Mike and I duck out, please be sure to go to the website, 𝗟𝗡𝗙live.com, and give us a review. Let us know what you think. Go to iTunes. And as usual, take care of yourself. We'll be back to you next time.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit 𝗟𝗡𝗙live.com. That's 𝗟𝗡𝗩live.com. Subscribe to our podcast. Discover more at 𝗟Eradiolive.com.